If you're sitting home like we are tonight, ready to get this spiritual conversation on, let me know in the chat that you are watching. I want to see who's here. I want to say hello because a lot of you have seen my email today and so many of you are excited. This is the topic. If you're going to listen to the show tonight, is the topic to listen to. Very excited to get into the afterlife. I know, medium, 25 years. This is what we talk about. But we've had so many different kinds of shows the last couple weeks. And I happen sometimes to be on YouTube at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's where I find my best guests. And I happen to find Curtis doing an interview about from somebody who talks to people with near death experiences. And I loved everything he had to say. And as you know, I like bringing on topics that I don't know that much about. So you've all heard of Edgar Cayce and all these other people. And this guy, I haven't ever heard of. I read a sampling of his writings and I am just blown away because they completely have validated so many different things I have seen over the last 25 years with people that have come through from the other side. From, as you guys know, we talk about the earthbound level, level 0, the different levels on the other side. And I couldn't really get that validated. And then I'm reading these writings from Emanuel Swedenborg, who we're going to talk about tonight, who lived in the late 1600s and 1700s, and he's talking about this stuff. So I can't wait to bring Curtis on tonight to share him with you and his views and his experience with his spiritual experiences and the writings of Swedenborg. And I invite you tonight also, if you have questions about the afterlife, please comment. We'll bring your questions on and you can get them answered. So I want to tell you a little bit more about him and his work. So you guys know I absolutely love hearing about the topics I haven't ever researched myself, especially revolving around spiritual topics. So if you want to hear about details of the afterlife and the amazing spiritual experiences of a man who documented his experience one by one in the 16th century, tonight's the night. So let's learn a little bit more about the man that we'll be hearing about tonight, who is Emanuel Swedenborg. And the life of Emanuel Swedenborg, this is taken from Curtis's website, the Swedenborg Foundation. I think it's his website. He might have to correct me on that, but I think it's his website. Was steeped simultaneously in the rational world of the physical sciences and in deep Christian faith. So he lived during the height of the Enlightenment, a period where intellectuals rejected dogmatic religious teachings in favor of science and reason, and his theology reflects a long struggle to understand the world of the spirit through investigation of the physical world. Ultimately, that struggle was resolved when he, as he described it, his spiritual senses were open and he began to interact directly with the denizens of heaven, hell, and the world of spirits in between. Not just one time, not just during an NDE, not just during a spiritually transformative experience, but for a while. He was taken on a tour of the afterlife, and I can't wait to learn more about this. Although his theological writings are based on experiences and visions that may seem unbelievable to a modern audience, as they did to many of Swedenborg's contemporaries, he writes with full awareness of how difficult his accounts may be to accept. And in keeping with his early scholarly training, he presents his ideas in a logical order, drawing examples from everyday life as proof of the truth of his words, inviting readers to judge for themselves. So why Curtis Childs? Why our special guest? He's awesome. He's kind of laid back. If you saw him out on the street, you'd be like, oh, he's a cool guy to have coffee with. You wouldn't expect that he's going to be doing this type of work. You just wouldn't. Cool guy, right? So here's a little bit of his story, but we're going to talk to him more about his story when he comes on. So while obtaining his degree in communications from Oakland University, Curtis experienced an internal battle with depression that led him to question God and his lifelong interest in Swedenborgian, I think I'm saying that right, theology. After a period of intense suffering, he recovered from his depression with the help of modern medicine, therapy, and returned to the spiritually uplifting messages he found in Swedenborg's writings. Now, Curtis is applying his education and desire to help others find peace through Swedenborg's insights by producing and hosting his weekly show, which is Off the Left Eye on YouTube, which has over 150,000 views at this point. Subscribers. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome him to the show. Please give him a warm welcome to the show. Welcome, Curtis Childs.
Hey, everybody.
How are you?
Thanks. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for saying that I was a cool guy.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
You're a cool guy.
Well, I got some people I need to tell that you said that. So,
Oh, well, if I said it, then
yeah,
it's testament. It's
well,
true.
that's
Because
good.
I don't say a lie. If you're not a cool guy, I'd be like, "Yo, Curtis, you say a lot of cool things and you're a cool guy to
Yeah,
interview, but you're not really a cool guy." I would
well,
tell you.
you got other strengths, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Wouldn't say. So, yeah, people are saying hi. They're saying, "Welcome, Curtis. How you doing?"
Hey, everybody, good to see
Um,
you.
he says I always nail it with great guests, so you will not be disappointed with
A
Curtis
lot
here
to live
tonight.
up to here. Yeah,
So, Curtis, I found you on YouTube. I was like, I'm just going to message you on your channel, and you were kind enough and generous enough to come on and talk to us tonight.
yeah,
I did go on the Swedenborg website and I did a little research myself and actually read the sampler about the afterlife according to Swedenborg and found it very interesting. And there's a couple things that I really want to get a little bit deeper into. But first, I want to ask you about you. And it says in your little bio that you were like a lifelong reader of his work. Like, how did you first hear about Emanuel Swedenborg, and how young were you when you first started to research his writings?
sure. My parents were readers of Swedenborg. I grew up going to a church where they would read Swedenborg in parts of the church. So it was I never discovered it. It was always just
Oh,
he was there in the water. But I mean, just because something's around doesn't mean you're that into it.
yeah,
I wasn't against it, but it was really around when I turned 18 or 19 that it really became real to me. Because as I said in my bio, I was suddenly needing help in my life. So I had a couple of crises that kind of spurred me into that. And I remember very distinctly reading some of his descriptions one day and thinking like, oh, this is really how my mind works. This is describing something that I can understand and is very insightful into the way that I experience life. And I remember there's kind of like a switch that flipped where it went from being something that, okay, this is something people that I know are interested in, to this is really important. And it began to help me
hmm,
in a way that nothing else did. And so I started to feel this responsibility, like, well, nobody knows about this.
right,
And there's a lot of people that would really benefit from it. So I got to try it out. You were just saying, everyone knows Edgar Casey.
yeah,
It's just amazing to me that people would not know Swedenborg, especially people who are interested in any kind of spiritual
yeah,
anything. I feel like he's like the grandfather of spiritual travel. So I'm so excited to get to introduce not just him, but why what he said matters to me, what
yeah.
it does for me, and why it's something that I'm stuck with, and why I spend all day on YouTube trying to get people to listen about it.
Yeah, please. It's funny because I've been in this industry a long time myself, and I haven't ever heard of this name at all until
Yeah,
I saw you on YouTube.
yeah,
And the stuff that I have read about how he talks about how the afterlife is organized, and how he talks about how we're here amongst all this, people who have just passed that kind of are around us, and how it all works, and the gates of heaven and the gates of hell. It's just kind of like, wow, like it's so detailed, you
right.
know? And I deal with people who are grieving, and I deal with people that have lost people, and people that are looking for hope, and people that, you wouldn't believe how many people just messaged me in the last couple of days with people who are needing hope that there is life after death. And, I think once you read his account, it's so detailed, it's hard to like not believe it.
And something that's cool as well is that it lends such support and credibility to people's modern experiences, to be able to say, look at this, hundreds of years ago this guy was reporting the same thing that these people are reporting. And there was so Dr. Raymond Moody, who wrote the book
Yep.
Life After Life, he
Yeah.
coined the term near-death experience in that book. In that book, there's a section, like 3 or 4 chapters back to back where he gives historical examples, because he was saying, wow, there's all these people are having these experiences these days, and they're so similar that you can label major categories of phenomena that appear in them. There's got to be, it can't just be it started now. Like, have people in the past ever done this? So he had like 4 parallels that he highlighted in there. I think the Bible was one of them, Tibetan Book of the Dead. There's 1 or 2 others, but then there was a whole chapter on Swedenborg.
Hmm.
And he was saying, look, Swedenborg, um, as Kenneth Ring put it, who was a co-founder of IANS, it was where you saw that interview with me, the
Yeah.
International Association for Near-Death Studies. He said, people who've had a near-death experience have peeked through the door into the afterlife, but Swedenborg explored the whole house.
Yeah.
Because as you said, in a nutshell, the Swedenborg story is, imagine if like Neil deGrasse Tyson tomorrow sent out a tweet or something that said, I've started to have spiritual experiences and I'm going to spend the rest of my career cataloging and trying to understand this, and I'll be publishing my findings. Swedenborg was a famous scientist who was at the top of a number of fields in the Enlightenment era. And he went from he was an inventor, an engineer. He was involved in powerful industries in Sweden, which was a world power at the time, and the House of Nobles there. He was leading, he introduced the first scientific journal in Sweden, founded certain branches of science that we still use. Totally smart guy. And he, in his mid-50s, started to be able to see dead people and have these spiritual experiences, and recorded it really meticulously. You have the period in which he started to have the experiences. He was keeping a journal at the time, so you can see all that throughout the rest of the time when he's having them. He's got that. It was 30 years that he was having these experiences every day, and
Every day.
every day, multiple times a day.
Every day. So people didn't think he was like, some people that he went to a doctor in the modern age. They'd say, here's some antipsychotics, because you're seeing things that aren't there.
Well, that's what people said when he published. I mean, you think about what that would do to your career.
Yeah.
If you were well respected. This is why no one's heard of him, because so he would every day for 30 years published 30 volumes and still had the approach. He'd honed his mind over the first 50 years of his life, 55 years, to be able to write really well and think really well and analyze things really well, because he was doing that about all these anatomy and physiology and all these sciences. So he turned that same mind onto his study of the spiritual world. So it's really lucid and clear and organized. Some people would say boring at times, but to me, it's just like these raw materials. It's not just here's what you find there, but this is why you find it. It's like the physics, the backstage of not just the afterlife, but life, like everything of life.
Wow. It's just kind of interesting to me, because people assume that because I'm a medium that I know what goes on the other side, right? And how it's organized and what people do over there, and do they have jobs, and do they have houses, and what happens. I'm like, no. I'm the medium. I'm between this world and the next world. So I'm the postman. I take the letter from up here and I deliver it into the post office. So people to the right person. So I get to see the levels of people on the earthbound level as they ascend and as they go through the gates, right? But I'm in the middle world, so I don't really they come down if they have crossed over, they'll come to me and I'll say, okay, Mary and John, who are on the other side, they have crossed over. Or Joey, who passed tragically and suddenly, he hasn't crossed over yet. He's still earthbound. Jake, who passed of an addiction, he's on the rehab level before he gets to go on the other side. Like, there's all these levels. But as far as when they go through the gates, what happens over there, I don't know about that. Right. And people think I do, but I'm I work in the middle realms. Right. So when you talk about, and I don't see them physically, but you're saying that Swedenborg did see them as if he sees you or me.
Yes. Yes to all the above. So he would have many different kinds of experiences. He would have sometimes when he would be out of body and like not conscious of anything that's in the room physically with him, and he'd be traveling off somewhere in the afterlife, seeing the people there, seeing what kinds of houses they live in, seeing what they do in their communities, that kind of thing. So sometimes he'd be doing that. Other times he would be sort of a mixed reality where he'd be here in this world, but be able to hear the commentary of spirits and so what they were thinking about. He said they could actually at times see through his eyes. So which was rare. So they were excited, like, wow, somehow this got hooked up so that we can see into this world. There'd be sometimes when he was writing and he would be able to just see certain colored lights that would give him an indication on the accuracy of what he was writing or not writing. It seemed like he had a full spectrum of experiences, but very commonly it was all the senses engaged, because he would describe this spirit looked like this, they talked like this is how they tried to affect me when they came up to me. And so it's usually very fleshed out in all detail.
So are you, I'm assuming you do know this, but what was his very first experience? Did he write about when he went from pure science, pure logic,
Yeah.
to that moment that he had the first experience? Is there any writing about kind of that transition and what
Yeah.
happened?
It's not a super clean transition.
Yeah.
He does write about it. There's a book that's the Swedenborg Foundation publishes. That's the not-for-profit that I work for, that essentially works to keep his books in print and keep them translated, because they're written in Latin originally. Because Latin was like sort of like English is today. It was the language of science and the learned. So he has a book that is, its English title right now, there's a couple of versions, but one of them is called Journal of Dreams. And this was a travel journal that he was keeping when his spiritual awakening started. So he was going from, I think it was London to Stockholm or the reverse. And he was, travel was serious undertaking back then. You had to take a long time. There were pirates and things. It was like dangerous. And so you'd want to catalog where you're going, what you're doing. But in that, you can see where the entries go from, I went to Amsterdam today, into he started to record strange dreams that he was having. And he not only started to write down his dreams, but he started to try to psychoanalyze them, which there was no such thing as that back then. But he would say, like, oh, this person appeared in my dream. I think it might mean this. But those dreams began to get more and more vivid. And eventually there was a couple of breakthrough moments. He said there's the first time a spirit addressed him. It was actually a guy sitting on a block of ice who said, like, don't move or I'll hit you, or something. I'd have to go back and look. It was some bizarre sort of thing. There was also a time when somebody told him to not eat so much.
Okay.
But then sort of through this sort of weird, strange beginning, he had this very powerful experience with who he believed to be God, which was kind of when the thing kicked into gear. There was this meeting that he had. He was I believe he was in a pub in London, like in a sort of back room eating there, that a colleague of mine has gone and visited that place. But that was where he met God and sort of got this feeling or explanation that he was going to go and have this new phase of his life. And then from there, he started to really have the conviction that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to study this, publish these books. So it was sort of a slope in or organic kind of thing, but there was a couple of key moments. There was also, I'll just give you all the weird sounding stuff. But one time when he saw a fly when he was still kind of like, wait, is this all real or not? But he saw a fly, and somehow he doesn't give much indication of how, but he knew that, like, this is not, I'm seeing something that's in the spiritual world right now. This is not non-physical. So there was a couple of firsts for him, but all of them kind of leading toward this major encounter that he had.
Can you tell me if he knew or was given the explanation by God at the pub, why he was being taken on this journey, what the purpose of it was, and why, did he know how long it was going to be? Did he know, why was he being taken through this?
He says in a couple different places what he believed his purpose was, but the way that he states it most commonly is that he was trying to keep knowledge of the afterlife alive. That especially with the rise of science, that a lot of people were becoming materialistic and denying the existence of life after death, as well as the Christianity that he grew up in and around was actually not very afterlife focused and had some strange ideas about people won't really be anywhere until their resurrection. These ideas that were the opposite of what he found to be the truth. So he said that to keep the leaders from misleading people, I need to explain how things really are. He also talked about, I mean, his works are, there's an explanation of afterlife, but there's also an explanation of what it means to be human, and what is, how you can pursue a life that focuses on what's good and true. So in there, he was talking about, he was trying to lay out basically a way of being that would move you more, put you more and more on a path toward, heaven, or whatever you want to call it, in the afterlife. So he felt like that he was doing those things and needed to correct mistaken ideas, religious and secular, about what we are as human beings and where we go after we die.
Interesting. So I'll go there. Because when I was reading his sampler, he was talking about thought and intent as to whether you go to heaven or not.
Yeah.
And basically, if your intent is not the same as your thought, or is not aligned, and there's a contradiction there, there's a problem, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
one of the features that he said differentiates the spiritual world from the physical world is the physical world, or the state that we're in the physical world, is that you can be duplicitous. You can act one way, but really feel and think a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because one reason is you kind of got your spirit inside your body, and your spirit can know, like, well, I'm not having fun right now, but I'm going to smile anyway because but in the spirit, it's kind of like you say what you think. Like there's not that much of a filter, which is part of why it's good we get this chance on earth to kind of, clean up our thoughts and get to a state where you'd want to have that happen. Your will, your intent makes you who you are. Your thought doesn't make you who you are. This is, he says in the beginning of his book, Divine Love and Wisdom, love is our life. So what we love most of all is what defines us, and actually the intellect follows from that, which was a huge shock to him, because he was a very intellectual, rational guy who had made kind of, he always thought, well, the mind leads and the feelings, what are these feelings? But he was saying that actually what you love, especially once you get to the afterlife, even if, let's say, you had loaded up a bunch of religious ideas in your mind about, and you talked well about God and the public good and all these kinds of things, but in your heart you were sort of in love with your own ego, and you were full of rage at anyone that didn't pay you respect or crossed your something. Ultimately, that's more who you, like, the will is who you are, and it will shape your mind to fit it. So you can't keep up a sort of pretense in the afterlife. So there's sort of the process that we go through after death is you gotta pick one. Like, are you nice or are you not nice? You can't be divided like we can here.
Yeah, and he was talking about when you meet other spirits, like when you come out and you're earthbound, which is kind of on the same level as we are here, that like people that are aligned in a different thought vibration or love vibration or frequency are actually unrecognizable to each other in the spirit world, because the alignment of frequency is so different. So like if somebody you're around, it lived a really bad life, and maybe you lived a more spiritual life, maybe in the world of the spirit, he's saying that you sometimes won't even connect, is what he was kind of talking about.
I think and certainly eventually you get to that state. He does talk about seeing almost everyone he had known initially after they had died, but as we progress and as we become more of who we really are, like I was just talking about, yes, definitely you go to a certain level, and it can be difficult for you to see other levels, because spiritually seeing and understanding are intertwined. So if you can't comprehend, let's say you don't get into the love thing and the truth thing, you can't really comprehend why people would want to live that way. Like it's hard for you to even see that. And actually, when people are not interested in what they're saying, they kind of fade what another person is saying. They sort of fade from view. There's a lot of your intent drives your experience. So if you don't care about something, it becomes harder and harder for you to interact with.
Yeah, and I read too, he thought that mediums weren't supposed to connect with people that have passed, right? That was something that was like a no-no for him, like of connecting to those that have passed, but yet he was essentially a medium in
Yeah,
his own
I
right.
don't think it was a no-no. I think we did a show called "Is It Safe to Talk to Spirits?"
Yeah.
And I think it's a mixed answer. I think he would put out a caution, like just like right now, if I'm gonna, like, should I just hop on a plane to like Rio de Janeiro and just walk around some neighborhood? I don't know. You don't know. You don't know who you're going to run into. Could run into very nice people.
Yeah.
Could be that they see that I'm a tourist. And he said that in the afterlife, there's plenty of it. Well, it's just full of people. It's just full of people, like this world is. Everybody who's malevolent and dies is there, and so you can be kind of like you're an easy target if you're reaching out too much into afterlife. But then again, he says that actually to speak with spirits and angels is the state that humanity used to be in and should be in if everything was well and good. Like that's the natural state, is that there wouldn't be this barrier between the physical and spiritual worlds. He says that, yeah, his ability to see the spiritual world is not something unique to him. This is all that happened was the eyes of his spirit were open. This is something that could theoretically happen with any of us. He talks about ancient people doing it much more often. He mentions in a few places, yeah, some people who have this and it doesn't cause them harm. So I think he would say be careful, but he never says like this is not permissible.
Okay. So if we were to if there was an open house of the afterlife, on Sundays, there's always the real estate open houses, right?
Yeah.
There's an open house. Could you take us like on a little tour of like maybe the bullet points of somebody comes out of the body, according to Swedenborg?
Yeah.
What's kind of like the escalator of what they're experiencing in the department store?
Sure. Yeah. So
Get my symbolism.
The afterlife department store
Yeah.
begins with so my channel is called Off the Left Eye, and that is taken from an account that he gave of what we're talking about here. What it's like to die and where you go after that. So he said that initially he could feel he wasn't in any physical distress or danger like some people who have near-death experiences are, but he said he was being shown it anyway, but kept alert enough that he would be able to remember and record the process. So it's like first his body started to slow down. He could feel his breathing slow down, but he could feel the breathing of his spirit continue, because to him, your spirit has a form just like your body. So even in the spirit, you can breathe. So he then felt this pull, like a pulling sensation, and the spirit left his body and went on this sort of 3-tier journey where he started in this state where he was surrounded by what he called heavenly angels or celestial angels. And to him, and he when he says angel, he means person who used to live in the world, who has, evolved so much or opened up to love and truth so much that they're these loving, amazing presences. So at first he was surrounded by these highest or deepest angels, and they were actually managing sort of the transition, making sure that no disturbing thoughts occurred in his mind, made sure that he felt safe and protected. And then when he started to wake up in the spirit, these different kinds of angels that he called spiritual angels came around him, and they're more sort of intellect oriented. And he said, it seemed like they pulled the covering off my left eye, and that gave me the use of my spiritual sight. So that's where actually, when I was naming the YouTube channel, I just grabbed a book and flipped it open and was like, oh, that's a good phrase, because I didn't know, like, what do you name a YouTube channel about Swedenborg? So it just, now we're stuck with it.
Yeah.
So from there, you start out in what Swedenborg would call the world of spirits. So the world of spirits, I think, is probably what you were referring to, earthbound. So this is something, it's the first place you go. Everybody goes there. And it's sort of like you figure out who you are there. All the confusion, and you have to end up within the world of spirits, getting your love, you know what you love and what you think to be the same, or you become consistent. Um, I want to say something about heaven and hell, according to Swedenborg. So, heaven and hell are both primarily states of mind. And heaven
Mhm.
is the state of mind where what you love most, or what you enjoy most, what you seek, with the main thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, is the doing what is good for people. So in some way benefiting the human race. Hell is so heaven is the pleasure you feel in benefiting the human race, and hell is the pleasure you feel in harming other people. So any life that is fully self-centered, when you get to the point where you are so self-focused and get your joy from harming and especially dominating other people, that's what he would call hell. So
Mhm.
all distance, all sort of organization and spatial relationships in the afterlife is caused by a difference in love. So people who love what is good and love each other and love the neighbor, they naturally congregate together. Love functions in the spiritual world like gravity does here. Gravity is the reason why I'm on the earth instead of floating off of it. It's why, matter coalesces. There, it's love. Love brings people who have similar kinds of love into communities with each other. So people that love service and helping and fairness and justice, they come together. And what would it be like to be among a bunch of people like that? And that is what you would call heaven. And then people who love um, you know, materialism and selfishness and their own pride and power, they gravitate toward each other as well. And that's what Swedenborg would call hell. So world of spirits is where you essentially get to choose, like, which kind of life do you want, and you go to people that are like you. So he talked about three different levels of heaven,
Mhm.
which correspond to the three different levels of the human mind. He said there are three levels in the human mind, and as they open, you come into these deeper heavens. And he talked about three levels of hell that are opposed to that. So the more you close off your mind, the deeper into that state that's called hell. And levels of the mind being like levels of magnification. So if you think about, you can think of your brain, which is, that's not your mind, but it's the physical part of you that interacts most closely with your mind. You can just think of it as an organ. There's just the brain. Or there's a second level, which is the tissue level. Like if you zoomed in, you can say, oh, this is made up of tissue. And then there's a third level, which is cells, like individual cells. So like levels of magnification, that's what the different levels of the mind. So you can just be basically open, like open in all the little parts, or open in every little teeny part. And so that those would cause these levels of heaven. Yeah, so I guess that's the department store. You got
Yeah.
7 floors. Of course, infinite variety within that, and it's not like, oh, all of heaven is to the right and all of hell is to the left. There are infinitely many communities, and you can have like a little heaven with a little hell below it over here, and then there's another one over there. It's a varied and diverse landscape, but you can know that these two communities, even if they distance from each other, they share what you would call heaven because they both have the same kind of love and truth. So
Yeah. I guess when I was reading some of his stuff, he talked about direction being heaven seemed more up and hell seemed more down. So he was definitely saying that, like, when the spirits were kind of looking up, that would be more where the gates were here, but that
yeah,
the gates were actually to the people who were going to the lower levels weren't even visible to the people that were going to the lower levels, or the people that were in the lower levels couldn't even see the gates of heaven. Like the gates were not even visible, even though they were in that world. to the spirits that weren't of that frequency.
Yes. Yeah. That each community, as I understand it, has its own kind of path that leads
Yeah.
to it. And he says that what you love opens up the path. So if you love, if you love harming people and being better than people and all that kind of stuff, you don't see or understand a path of humility and service to some community that's up there. So yeah, and I think that's part of that is for safety, but it's just like how the physics of the spiritual world work. Like what you love determines how you experience the afterlife.
Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, and usually my people are very chatty, but they're listening intently, and that's why they're quiet tonight. So there's people out there I know, because I know who watches the show and what they think about and who they've lost in their lives, and they'd probably want to ask, like, they were worried about somebody in their life who may have not led a great life or may have led the life of selfishness, but they still love them anyway. Is there a way for those spirits to ascend or to make restitution or to move higher into the other levels according to Swedenborg?
Well, you never know what somebody's spiritual state is.
Right.
So we can see somebody and say, well, they are selfish and they're on a bad path, but we don't know, because you don't really know what their motive is, and you don't know what their mitigating circumstances are, and you don't know what sort of psychological load they were dealing with. Swedenborg calls it spiritual heredity, that we're born all with sort of different tendencies toward positive and negative things. So it could be that if somebody is so it could be someone like I never really struggled with wanting to steal things in my life, and I had enough material. I did when I was like a kid. Like I stole a few things from a convenience store. Like, this is fun. It was stupid, but I didn't get. I was like whatever. I was 11 or something, right? So, but in my adult life, I just never have really had to resist. I'm gonna steal things now, but I know people that like that's a struggle in their life. Like they just want to steal stuff, and so it could be that because they are born with that. I don't know. They could have made a ton of progress. It could be that they could have stolen a ton more stuff, but they were able to keep that. So I'm just trying to say, you never know. Yeah, of course you don't want anybody to not be where you are. Yeah, I think Swedenborg talks a lot about in the world of spirits, you have a chance to, get your misconceptions undone. And he talks about, even everyone who's in the state that he would call hell, like everything that happens there is intended to remove the evil that they are in, or whatever that they love. He talks about it kind of like the way organic matter recycles, so things can be broken down. He talks about this place called the lower earth, which is kind of like, it's like adjacent to the hell state, but it's not the same thing. And that people do go down in there and then come back up. I don't know. As far as like long-term, I would think he doesn't,
Yeah.
I would think like, what would be the point if we could never, if someone could just get sucked into that and then never come back out of it? What would be the point? Is really like, are we really going to ever rest until we can get everyone back? And even like, sure, there is an element of the higher and lower can't see each other at certain times, but also everybody that's in heaven, in the heaven state, he says, anybody in heaven would gladly trade places with anyone in hell if anyone in hell, if that meant they could get out of hell. And part of what people, but people in hell aren't interested in that. You're only in hell if you're not interested in that. Swedenborg talks to people that are in hell, and he says at the end of his book, Divine Providence, he says, forgive me for including this to fill out the rest of this page, but some spirits from hell wanted to talk to me. And what they were saying was basically like, oh, come on, like heaven is so dumb. It's like, it's really cool, like down here, because we get to do these things, even though they're harmful. It wasn't like, they're not like, please let me out of here. Like you only go there if you love what's there. You only go there if you love what's there. So I think that, yeah, but I would think, I was going to say as well is that part of like in heaven, the core of heaven is doing useful things for other people. So part of what you do when you're in heaven, some people do, is go into hell and take care of things there, make sure people aren't harming each other. Like go try to work with people there and make that as good a place as possible. So I would hope that we're getting it so that everybody ends up happily in some kind of heaven state. I can't imagine that's not the plan ultimately, but yeah, you'd hope that everybody that you can like still hang out with, and it sounds like no matter what, you can still communicate with people, even if it's not all the time. But there's ways, there's sort of like spiritual technologies that allow you to like hang out in a vibrational level that you don't belong in for a certain amount of time if it's doing something good.
Yeah, I guess just bringing my experience into it, dealing with a lot of earthbound spirits that haven't crossed over, when they're truly earthbound and unsettled on the lower levels of the earthbound, and I call it level 0 from what I've seen. I didn't really deal with spirits below level 0, which I would say are the negatively charged lower levels. But when people were really unsettled and really on that lower level for too long, they would actually start looking like they didn't shower, and their nails would start growing. And if it was a guy, he'd be like full beard, hair long. And then
Yeah,
a lot of these people would, I would see their family members maybe a year later or 6 months later, and the person would come back and they had a haircut and they were, and as they were like, it seemed like they were making amends with some things, or they had to come and help somebody here. And then I always knew when they were going over to the other side, because somebody from the other side would come down, come through to me, and they'd be holding their hand almost like you're taking a kid from to college for the first
yeah,
time. And so they'd say, "Oh, I'm preparing." And the person would come down and they would take them around. And then when they would cross over and come back, they were like shiny. Like everything was like they got a haircut, they got their hair colored, everything was
yeah,
good. And they had the difference was they had light beams behind them now. So I would see actual light beams knowing that they have crossed over. And then their families would still come at the same frequency, but then they would say, we can't come as much anymore. Like their frequency would get so high that it was like that purpose had been served and they have to kind of go and do what they need to do. So that frequency couldn't really be attended to as much anymore.
yeah. That's fascinating. The hair growing long and the nails and stuff, because
Yeah.
that hair and nails correspond or like symbols of sort of external stuff. So like superficial kind of, so it could be like if you're staying there too long, you're getting too involved in this, like it's just fascinating. The world of the spirit, as Swedenborg described it, is full of this like visual symbolism like you're talking about,
Yeah.
because somebody's got something going on in their mind and heart, and that shows up in the way that they look, and when they've gotten cleaned up, that shows up in the way that, whereas here I can like try to get looking good, but that doesn't mean I'm any nicer, or it doesn't mean I'm
Right.
changing inside. But
Right.
there, like the outside matches the inside.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then the other couple levels that I saw that weren't really validated by anybody that I know, where there was a rehab on the other side for people that have passed, because the soul contract of addiction is a really advanced contract where you can really rise up 7 levels instead of 1, what I was told. So if somebody takes on that contract and then passes of the addiction before the time they're supposed to pass, they actually go through a rehab on the other side where they actually, make amends and go through all these spiritual processes. And then there's also like a light chamber that I saw with different crystal beds and things, but big crystal caves, like with rose quartz and all sorts of stuff. That if somebody had a terminal illness, their spirit body was carrying that to the other side and needed to be like recharged. The spirit body had to be recharged back to health. So they would sit in these chambers, these healing chambers, so their spirit body could become whole again. So I've seen those things as well from the other side, saying they were in this chamber or this healing area, like a hospital, but it's like
Yeah,
crystal. Um, and
sounds great.
then, yeah, it's just different levels. And then there was also a suicide level too that I saw. So a lot of people that have decided to, but people could step off of those levels according to, if I would connect with them later on, they were doing better,
Yeah.
depending on where they were headed. So my question to you is, once they cross the gates and they're over there and I don't see them for a while, I don't know what goes on over there. So are there houses? Are there, do people get married on the other side? Do people eat? Do people get to experience hugging someone and feeling that sensation? Like what, or are people just like flying around and like on a cloud? Like what the Swedenborg experience with this?
Yeah. So people just only play the harp there, and they
Yeah.
sit on clouds. And even in Swedenborg's day, there was a lot of thought about the soul as being something pretty insubstantial, that you would be sort of like a breath, sort of a formless consciousness that would go around. So something that Swedenborg was very adamant about is like, no, people are people on the other side. You have a spiritual body, your mind, which is your spirit, according to Swedenborg, it's in a form, just like your body is in a form. So meaning it's got all the parts. It's got lungs and hands and eyes and ears in a spiritual version of each. So people there are people, and life is in some ways similar to here, and in some ways very different. So it's similar in that, yeah, you go and you see other people, and you see landscapes, and you see trees and nature and animals, and you have houses that are there. Yep. He talked about people getting married. He described a wedding in heaven and what it's like. He talked about people who had been married in the world reconnecting after they, one had died and the other had joined them. He talked about the jobs that people have, because actually the foundation of heaven, as joy, as I said before, is usefulness. So there's some people that think, oh yeah, it'd be so great. It would be heaven is I just never had to work again, or if I just did like praise God all the time, or if I just was feasting all the time. And he actually describes a scenario in which everybody who had this mistaken idea of heaven, they get to go and live that for a while. Like, okay, you think it's all just a bunch of praising God? Go ahead. Like here you go. Here's a church, and they go through this simulation. So where they, after a few days, they're like, I hate this now. I don't want to do this. So, and then from there, they're shown that any of those things can be a good part of life, but the only thing that's a real center for a heavenly life is the joy of the useful thing that you're doing. So what you're doing, to your job, kind of your job, like what you're doing to serve the human race. So like that, what you're doing on your channel right now, which is like, I'm going to try to educate people about there's more to life than just the physical. There's all kinds of jobs like that. And he describes some of them vaguely. He does talk about angels that sort of chaperone people who are dying, into the spiritual world. He talks about angels that help with mitigating any kind of negativity that people in the hell state of mind want to do to each other. He says that the kind of functions and jobs that we have here are relatively few compared to how many there is there, that everything is expanded there. He says going from this world into the afterlife is like going from a small village into a great city. Not meaning that it's more dense or urban there, but just there's so much more going on. There's more people there, but also there's just more to do. There are colors that you haven't seen here. There's more phenomena. Houses, everything there is sort of the essence of where we get everything here. So he says you see houses, amazing houses in heaven that are the quintessential essence of architecture, and that we kind of get our architectural ideas from those buildings. But here, in the physical world, matter is what determines everything. So the fact that I have a house is just because at one point some people came over and started hammering things together, and that's why I have a house, and because I could get money to pay for it. In the spiritual world, consciousness is what drives everything. So your heart and mind are what create the house that you're in. The house you're in is a reflection of your heart and mind. So these people that are in heaven who have gone through this journey and this opening up and have a really loving, beautiful mindset are housed in these amazing buildings, which are a reflection of what they're like inside. So yes, there's a lot of stuff you'd recognize, but there's a lot of stuff that's way above and beyond what we have here.
Do people, like, obviously we're in a physical body, so we sleep here on the airplane. Do they get to rest over there and go into a sleep state?
Yes.
And then what does their sleep state do if they're already past? Do they dream too? Like
Yeah,
what?
it does seem like we did an episode that's called Where Dreams Come From, and it does seem like spirits. So Swedenborg would call people who are in the spiritual world still spirits, and then people who had ascended into heaven, he would call those angels. So it's all just people, but he would break it up like that. Swedenborg would talk about that he was dreaming, and while he was dreaming, the spirits around him were having the same kind of dreams. So you do have dreams there. He talked about visiting, I'm just trying to piece together everything I can remember about it. He talked about visiting a community in heaven and what they did in the morning. Again, though, everything there, like here we have days because of the revolution of the earth. There, the days again are caused by the mind and heart. So when you're in a full, clear state of love and wisdom, it's like noon. When you're in a state of a little bit less wisdom and love, it's like evening. And when you're in your lowest state, it's like sort of like twilight. Heaven doesn't have like a full night, but it's got this sort of darkness that's like that. And then when you're in your most warmth and love, it's like morning. Same thing with the seasons. Like everything, which probably sounds really weird to say, but everything sort of comes out of, like with the directions, everything comes out of what's going on inside your heart and mind. So all those things do occur, but they're different. Like they are spiritual there, whereas they're physical here.
Awesome, man. I can go on and like we're gonna have to do like a fireside chat or something where we could bring people on to talk to you. Where there's so much. No, I have one more question before we get to audience questions because there are some questions here. Do people eat over there like meatballs and stuff and spaghetti? And do they eat French fries? Do they?
Yeah, they do eat.
Really? Okay.
So okay, and this is a little bit confusing to me because they'll definitely eat. He'll talk about food being there. I don't think so. The food for the spirit is goodness. That's what actually nourishes the spirit, and truth nourishes in the same way that water does. And I don't know if like the good acts that you do feed you like food does, and then that becomes food in front of you, or if it's like there's food, but that's more just for the experience of it, and you don't need it to sustain you like you do in this world, because you don't have the same kind of cellular need for things. But he does talk about eating, so I don't know exactly how that works.
Yeah. So my last question, I know I said this was my last question, but I have a last question. Did Swedenborg ever come back after he died and visit somebody that was alive and talk to them and say, give them some insight after he died?
Yeah, I don't know. Is it? I don't know who that is. Who is the Spirits book? Do you know who that is? It may be Edgar Casey, but maybe it's somebody else. There's a couple people who have said, well, Swedenborg came to me and this is what he said.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I read him, I'm like, it doesn't really sound like Swedenborg. So I don't know. I don't know. I would imagine probably, but so far I haven't come across anything where I feel like, because I know Swedenborg, like how he thinks. I've never met the guy, but I know I've read so much of him that I kind of get a sense of like who he is, and I haven't quite come across anything where I was like, that's him.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's get to some audience questions. Matthew Magda has a question. Does Swedenborg address reincarnation? Great question.
Yeah, we have a show that's called "Do We Reincarnate?" So basically, any question you ask, we've got a show about it, and it's a sort of a complex answer. He doesn't seem like he says that you reincarnate, like you come back and live multiple physical lives in the world. He seemed to believe that you have a constant progression, but there's some linear elements to it. So you are learning and growing forever, but you do this dynamic changing, the vast majority of it in the spiritual world. So just like in physical life, you go from the womb and you do a lot of forming and stuff there, but then you're born and you're out in the physical world. This world is kind of like the womb to the spiritual life. So we do some early formation that matters here, but then you go out and a lot do it. You're growing in the spiritual world. A lot of the things that are associated with reincarnation, like sort of karma and you get what you give, but also even some of the like, oh, you've sort of forgotten who you are and then you come back into it. He does describe those things happening, but all within the spiritual world. He never mentions, as far as I know, somebody coming back and living a physical life again.
It's interesting because it seems like a circle to me that there's been so many times throughout my career where a spirit's coming through and they're holding a baby a certain way, and they show me, the blue or the pink, and they show me the baby. They're basically the baby's on the other side before they come down here.
Oh yeah.
So they'll say to me, okay, and if they hold a baby a certain way, I know the baby passed. But then if they hold it and they're holding it out for me, then they're like, tell them a baby's coming. This is what they look like, the personality. And people have come back and said, oh my God, like that's, so
Yeah.
I've had my own experience with that. And it's just interesting that the children are existing on the other side before they come here, like kind of a circle.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Cute.
Joe has a question. What level are we on now? If I can interact clearly with you, then we are on the same level.
So your spirit is in the spiritual world right now. So the spiritual world is kind of confusing because Swedenborg says the world of spirits to mean that halfway place, but the spiritual world to mean all of heaven and hell in the world of spirits together. So we have a spirit and a body right now. And just like your body is somewhere physically, your spirit is somewhere in the spiritual world. And actually, your spirit travels around the spiritual world throughout your life, depending on what you come to love and what you come to be interested in. And you actually sort of change spiritual company, and that changes the way that you think and feel. That is, as people grow and change, he talks about when we're little babies, we're surrounded by certain kinds of angels. That's why we're so innocent in the way we are then. When we grow into adolescence, we're surrounded by different kinds of spirits. So you can actually, your spirit can be going into heaven while you're still in the world. Swedenborg actually talked about the time in which he said he was made a member of some heavenly community while he was still on earth. So depending, most of us will, we don't go that far in this life, but we sort of set that happens after we die. But some people can actually be among angels, kind of living in a heavenly community while you're still here. So yeah, so we're it's not, afterlife isn't something we'll go into someday. We're there. We're just not really aware that we're there, but we are being influenced by where we are.
Awesome. I know there's a couple more questions. Are you okay to take 2 more questions, or are you good?
Yep.
Okay. Matthew asks, if God is love and we are here to learn, why would there be a need for a hell if God is in fact love?
So it's hard to use that word without thinking of the traditional definition of hell, which is if I understand how Christians usually use that word, it means this is a place of punishment that you go to because you broke some rules and now God is punishing you there. Swedenborg again says that heaven and hell are describing the state you're in when you love something that is helpful or love something that is harmful. The reason that there needs to be a hell is that is the place where the people who have centered their lives around something evil can be the most happy and comfortable. He said that if you had centered your life around doing horrific things to people, you can't even breathe in heaven. Like, you don't like it there because heaven is mutual love. So hell, the space of hell is really God trying to make the environment in which you can be the happiest given what you're centering your life around. So it's like the same love is operating in all places. This is God saying, okay, I really wish you weren't doing that to people, but I'm going to try to give you a space where you can have the best possible life you can have. That's what hell is. So everybody has to be free to be able to love whatever they want to love and intend and do what they want to do. And God's intent is that everyone come to love goodness and truth and learn to live the life of heaven, which is a life of love for your neighbor and community. But there has to be a place available for people who choose they want to love the opposite of that. So that's hell. And hell is not fire and punishment. It's just kind of the unpleasantness of the life that goes with these harmful things that people grow attached to. So it's like, if you look out at ecosystems and ecology, there are all these different ecological niches where you have a certain species that wants to live right where it's most comfortable. The spiritual world is kind of like that. Is like there's spots where everyone can get what they're looking for, and that's where they're happiest. Hopefully that they decide that come up to higher things, but no, you can't be forced to. So in the meantime, God is making sure everyone has a space where they feel comfortable.
Yeah, and just reading the little sampler that I had read talks about even in the darkest places of what is traditionally known as those lower levels, there's still cracks of light, of God's light that is coming down just in case somebody wants part of that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You couldn't exist. There's no such thing as full detachment from God. We couldn't exist. And also doesn't matter where you are. God is still there with you every day, trying to give you the happiest life you can have there. Like that mission goes on.
And just one last question. Noel, what information is there about our own past lives and how we previously died, if that is accessible?
So he doesn't really have much about that. You could see our show, Do We Reincarnate? But there's not that much. I think that there's plenty of other sources that have a lot of more information on that. Even though he was talking about afterlife, but also really the focus of his books is the present. Because he talks about the afterlife, but it's really about teaching us how to live now, because he's saying, look, how you live now is so important. It really shapes your afterlife and your experience now. So that was really sort of his focus.
Yeah. And if you want to read about past lives, Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters, that's a great book. Or get your own past life regression, which I've experienced before. Carol Bowman, she was on Oprah before. She's amazing. I sent a lot of my clients to her. I don't know if I think she's retired now. I don't know if she's still doing that anymore. But yeah, this Swedenborg is very interesting. But thanks, Noel, for your question. I just want to thank Curtis so much for coming on here. Matthew Magnus says, best show ever. Absolutely epic. Noel is very happy. That's good. I haven't met Guy yet, but hi, Guy. Good to see you. So let's talk about how to connect with Curtis. Basically, his YouTube channel is just like anything you want to know about anything spiritual or afterlife. It's like there's a video for it. I mean, there's so many videos. There's videos on angels and afterlife and all sorts of stuff. He does. I haven't even been through half the stuff on there, but it's amazing. So is there anything you want to say about your channel, Curtis?
Yeah, check it out. youtube.com/offtheLeftEye. We have literally 1,000 videos on there talking like this about all the ins and outs of the fascinating world and afterlife that Swedenborg describes. There's a lot of stuff in there that's been really helpful to me. If you want to connect with us, leave a comment under any video and we'll find it. We'll find it. We respond to all the comments, and we'll be happy to chat about anything you want to talk about. So yeah, come on over and check us out.
Awesome. I'm really, really, again, Curtis, so happy you came on. I know you're a little under the weather, and I hope that we didn't have you talk too much tonight.
No.
So amazing. Everybody loved it. Just go, if you could do one thing to support Curtis, go to his YouTube channel and subscribe, and make sure that you oh yeah. So yes, youtube.com off the left eye. what we
Select
just,
off the left eye.
yeah.
Yep.
So basically, if you go on YouTube and you just put that into the search bar, you will find Curtis's channel.
If you write the word Swedenborg into YouTube search, we're like the only channel that comes up for that. So you'll find us.
Yeah. And be sure, if you're watching me on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to my channel, because we have great people like Curtis here. And every week, somebody in the transformational space, healing space, trauma healing space, spiritual space, intuitive space. So make sure you subscribe. Great. Belle found it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Curtis, for coming. This was an amazing show. And we will see you guys next week. I don't know who's coming on next week yet. It'll be a surprise. So awesome. Thanks, guys. You have a wonderful, wonderful holiday weekend. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.